There was a time when I thought my wife, Emily, and I had a solid marriage. We weren't perfect, but we had built a life together, one that felt steady, predictable, and safe. Maybe that was my mistake, thinking safety meant loyalty, thinking comfort meant trust. But life has a way of proving just how blind a man can be. It started with a picture, not one I took, not one she asked me to look at over dinner, but one that popped up on my phone as I scrolled through social media on a slow evening. Emily, laughing, her head tilted just so, her eyes lit up with something I hadn't seen in years. The photo itself wasn't the problem. The problem was who took it. His name was Adrian Cole, a photographer I had never met, but apparently my wife had. His Instagram was filled with glossy portraits of women, some professional, some amateur, all of them carefully framed to look like something more than just images. And then there was Emily, front and center, in more than one post. Another stunning session with the radiant Emily Carter. Always a pleasure capturing her beauty. A pleasure capturing beauty. The word stuck in my throat like something rotten. I clicked on the comments. Gorgeous model. She's breathtaking. And then, the worst one. You two make magic together. Magic. My wife. With him. I wasn't the kind of man who jumped to conclusions. But I wasn't the kind of man to ignore what was right in front of me, either. I clicked on her profile, scrolling back through her recent posts. She had shared his pictures, more than once. And I had missed them. Missed the subtle shift in the way she talked about her work trips. Missed the way she started wearing her hair differently. Missed the way she smiled down at her phone late at night. I had missed everything. I set my phone down and looked across the room. Emily was curled up on the couch, oblivious, laughing at something on TV. Carefree. Untouched by the storm she had just unleashed in my mind. That was when the hatred started. Not just anger, not just betrayal, but a deep, seething resentment that burned hotter than I thought possible. Because this wasn't just cheating. This was deliberate. This was flaunted. This was her showing the world something I had been too blind to see. And she had no idea I had seen it now. I stayed quiet that night. I didn't say a word. But in my mind, something had shifted. The game had changed. She just didn't know she had already lost. The next morning, I woke up before Emily. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment of the night before. Every picture, every comment, every little sign I had ignored until now. She stirred beside me, stretching, mumbling something under her breath before rolling over. Peaceful, comfortable, no hint of guilt, no sign that she had spent the last several months betraying me in broad daylight. I got up, quietly, and left the room. In the kitchen, I made coffee. My hands were steady, though my mind was anything but. I unlocked my phone and pulled up Adrian Cole's Instagram again. I scrolled through his feed, slower this time, examining every photo of Emily like I was searching for something deeper than what was already plain as day. The way she looked at him in the pictures, it wasn't just admiration. It wasn't just some artistic, moody photo shoot. It was familiarity, comfort, a kind of warmth I hadn't seen from her in years, and now I knew why. Then I saw it. One of the photos buried deeper in his feed. A picture of Emily sitting on a stool, leaning slightly toward the camera. Her dress was off the shoulder, her lips parted slightly, her eyes dark and playful. He had captioned it, "The way she looks at you when she trusts you completely." I felt my stomach drop. That was something a man wrote about a woman who belonged to him. Not just some client, not just some married woman. And the worst part? She had liked the post. Not just that one. Several of them. And she wasn't the only one. There were comments. Some from women, others from men. A few flirty, a few admiring. But then at the bottom of that post was hers. "You always capture me perfectly." The hatred inside me grew. This wasn't just some mistake. This wasn't some one-time lapse in judgment. This was a whole second life she had built. One she wasn't even hiding. Not really. She was just counting on me being too blind to see it. I scrolled back up and looked at his tagged photos again. That's when I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a private account. At the end of captures, Emily and Adrian. My chest tightened, but my hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed steady. The rage wasn't wild. It was something colder now, sharper, more focused. I tapped the account. Private. No posts visible. I requested to follow, but I already knew she would see that. And I wasn't about to let her know I was on to her. So, I did the next best thing. I backed out, went back to his followers list and scrolled, looking for any mutuals, looking for anyone who might have already followed that private account. It didn't take long. A few names popped up, friends of hers, colleagues. Then I found one, a woman from her office. Sarah. I'd met her before, had dinner with her and her husband once. I clicked on Sarah's profile, scrolled through her followers, and there it was. The private account was there, but Sarah's own profile wasn't locked. I clicked in. The first thing I saw was a post from 3 months ago, a picture of Emily at a restaurant. Not a big deal at first glance, but then I looked closer. The lighting was dim, the table set for two wine glasses visible. The caption read, "Dinner with the best at Eanda Captures." My stomach turned. I kept scrolling. There was another one, Emily and Adrian on a hotel balcony, city lights glowing behind them. The angle was low, like someone had taken the photo without them knowing, but it was clear, too clear. And then, the worst one yet. A close-up of a hand resting on a man's leg. A familiar hand. Emily's. My whole body went still. I stared at the screen, waiting for some other explanation to come to me. Something that wasn't what I already knew deep down. But there was nothing. No excuse. No justification. There was only the truth. Emily wasn't just sleeping with him. She was with him, in every way that mattered. And she had been for months. I locked my phone, inhaled slowly through my nose, and exhaled. I had spent years trusting her. I had spent years building something I thought was solid, something real. And she had burned it down without a second thought. The sound of footsteps pulled me out of my thoughts. I glanced up. Emily walked into the kitchen, stretching her arms over her head, looking half asleep but content, like she hadn't just shattered my world. "Morning," she said, reaching for the coffee pot. She poured herself a cup, scrolled through her phone, smiling slightly at something she saw. I wondered if it was him. She leaned against the counter, sipping her coffee, oblivious, completely unaware that I knew. That was the part that enraged me the most. She thought she had me fooled. She thought she was still in control. She thought this was still her game. She had no idea I was about to change the rules. I pocketed my phone and stood up. She barely glanced at me. "You okay?" I forced my voice to stay steady. "Yeah, just have some things to take care of." She nodded, not even looking up. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to let her dig her own grave first. I didn't confront Emily that day, or the next. Instead, I did something far more satisfying. I watched. There was a kind of twisted power in knowing the truth while she went on pretending. She had no idea that every word she said, every move she made, was under a microscope now. I didn't miss a thing. For the first time in a long time, I paid attention, and suddenly, everything made sense. The extra time she spent on her phone. The way she always angled the screen away from me. The sudden, urgent deadlines at work. The new lingerie that didn't seem to make an appearance in our bedroom. The way she started dressing just a little differently. Nothing drastic, just subtle changes, like she was fine-tuning herself for someone else's gaze. I had ignored these things before because I had trusted her. Now, I saw them for what they were. I let the days pass, gathering every little detail, every small inconsistency, letting her dig her own grave 1 inch at a time. But I didn't stay quiet completely. I started planting seeds. At breakfast, I casually mentioned I should get into photography. Seems like a good hobby. Emily barely looked up from her phone. "Yeah? You never seemed interested in that before." I shrugged, sipping my coffee. Guess I just realized how much power a camera has. How it can capture things people don't even realize they're showing. She didn't flinch, just nodded absently, still scrolling. But I noticed the way her fingers tightened around her mug. A couple of nights later, as we lay in bed, I stretched and said, "I was thinking we should go on a trip. Maybe a weekend getaway. Just us." That got her attention. She turned her head on the pillow, blinking at me in surprise. "A trip? That's random." "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I just think we haven't spent enough time together lately." She hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it. Then she smiled. "That sounds nice." But I already knew she was calculating. wondering how she'd explain that to Adrian, how she'd rearrange her little secret life to fit this unexpected inconvenience. A few days later, I saw my opening. Emily had left her laptop open on the dining table while she was in the shower. That was unusual. She was normally careful, but I had been patient, and now she was slipping. I walked over, keeping my steps light, and tilted the screen. Her email was open, and there it was, an unread message from Adrian Cole. Subject: last night was incredible. I felt my jaw tighten. My fingers itched to open it, to see every disgusting word, but I didn't. That would be too obvious. Instead, I did something better. I grabbed my phone and took a picture of the screen. Evidence. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stepped back, resetting the laptop exactly as she had left it. Then I walked away, forcing my breathing to stay even. Emily came out of the shower a few minutes later, towel wrapped around her, hair damp. She smiled at me as she walked past, completely unaware that I had just caught her in the act. She had no idea that her world was about to burn. The perfect trap. The next morning, I made my move. While Emily was out running errands, I finally accepted the follow request on that at Capture's account using a fake profile I had set up the night before. I had a feeling Adrian was stupid enough to approve it without question. I was right. Within an hour, I had access, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Private photos of Emily. Not just the ones from the hotel or the restaurant, but ones that were unmistakable. Intimate. Personal. Proof of everything. Captions like, "The way she looks when she's finally mine." Mine! I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. They had no shame, no guilt, no fear of consequences. They thought I was nothing, and that's what made it worse. Emily wasn't just having an affair. She had completely erased me from her mind. She had already rewritten herself into someone else's life. That was when I realized this wasn't just about cheating. This was about disrespect. She didn't just betray me. She mocked me. She flaunted it. She lived her little fantasy life right out in the open, convinced I was too blind, too stupid, too trusting to ever see it. She had underestimated me. That was her mistake. And now, she was going to pay for it. But not the way she expected. No, I wasn't going to scream at her. I wasn't going to beg for answers or demand an apology. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking she had any power left. I was going to turn her own game against her. Slowly, methodically, and when the moment was right, I was going to destroy the little illusion she had built. One perfect picture at a time. I spent the next few days letting Emily believe everything was normal. That was the trick with liars. They got too comfortable when they thought they'd gotten away with it. They convinced themselves they were smarter, more careful, always one step ahead. She had no idea I had already taken control of the game. Every moment she spent on her phone, every glance she stole at the screen when she thought I wasn't looking, every time she sighed and mentioned being so exhausted from work, I let it all pass without a reaction. I nodded when appropriate, hummed in response when necessary, and gave her exactly the kind of attention a man gives his wife when he has no reason to suspect her. But I knew, and the knowledge settled inside me, hardening like cement. The days blurred together in a way that almost felt laughable. Emily was so predictable now that I knew what to look for. She had patterns, a routine. I noticed that she never left her phone face up anymore. It was always turned over, as if a simple black screen could erase what she was really doing. I noticed that her showers were longer, and that she took them right after coming home instead of before bed, washing away the evidence before she even sat down for dinner. I noticed how she had started sleeping with her back to me. Had I always missed these things? Or had she just grown sloppy? Setting the stage. I knew it wasn't time to strike just yet. A good plan needed patience, and I was nothing if not patient now. Instead, I started planting seeds. One night, over dinner, I leaned back in my chair and said, I've been thinking about photography." Emily glanced up, mid-bite, eyebrows raising slightly. "Photography?" I nodded, casually swirling my drink. "Yeah, it's crazy how much a single picture can tell you about someone. The way they're looking at the camera, their body language, the little things they don't even realize they're showing." She froze, just for a second. Then she forced a light laugh. "Well, yeah, I guess. That's kind of the point of photography, right?" I shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe some pictures tell more than they're supposed to. This time, she didn't respond right away. She just stabbed at her food, suddenly more interested in cutting her steak than looking at me. Good. I was inside her head now. Another night, while she was brushing her hair before bed, I leaned against the doorway and said, "We should go on a trip. Just the two of us." She glanced at me in the mirror, her hand pausing mid-stroke. "A trip?" "Yeah," I said. "I feel like we haven't had time together lately." She turned around, forcing a smile. "That's sweet." I watched her carefully. "So, what do you think?" She hesitated. Not the normal kind of hesitation, where someone is thinking about their schedule, considering logistics. This was different. This was hesitation wrapped in calculation. She was figuring out how to say no without making me suspicious. Emily set the brush down and laughed lightly. "Work's just been crazy lately. I don't think I could get the time off right now." Liar. But I didn't call her out on it. I just smiled. "Yeah, I get it." And that was it. That was all it took. Now she felt safe again. She thought she had dodged whatever subconscious red flag had gone up in her mind. She was so sure she had me fooled. And I let her believe it. The breaking point? It was 2 nights later when I finally got what I needed. Emily had gone to take a shower, leaving her laptop open on the dining table. Normally, she wasn't careless. But I had been patient, and patience always paid off. I walked over, glancing down at the screen. Her email was open. And there it was. Adrian Cole. Subject: "Miss you already." I clicked. "Hey, beautiful. Last night was incredible. You always know how to drive me crazy. I can't wait for our weekend together. Counting the days." He had attached a photo. I hesitated. A small part of me, the part that still wanted to believe this wasn't real, begged me not to click on it. But I did. And there she was, Emily, wearing my sweatshirt, sitting on our bed, smiling. My pulse pounded in my ears. Not because I was shocked. I had already known, but because seeing it, having undeniable proof, felt like a different kind of betrayal. She had brought him here, into our home, into our bed. I gripped the edge of the table, forcing myself to stay calm. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't storm into the bathroom and rip the curtain open. That wasn't the way this was going to go. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and took a picture of the screen. More evidence. More power. Then I quietly shut the laptop and walked out of the house. I needed air. I needed to stop myself from doing something reckless. Because as much as I wanted to scream at her, as much as I wanted to rip this entire life apart in a single night, that wasn't enough. She had humiliated me, mocked me, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Flipping the script, the next morning, I played my role perfectly. I made coffee, scrolled through my phone, even kissed her cheek before she left for work. She barely noticed, distracted by something on her screen. I wondered if it was him. I watched her walk out of the house, get into her car, drive away. Then I got to work. First, I printed out every single piece of evidence I had. Every email, every photo, every comment she had left on his page. Then, I went into our bedroom and stripped the bed. Sheets, pillows, everything gone. I wasn't going to sleep in a place that had been tainted by her affair. Then I made a phone call. "Hey, I need a favor. Do you still have access to that event space?" A pause. Then my friend laughed. "Planning a party?" I smiled. "Something like that." That night, Emily came home, dropping her bag by the door. "Long day," she sighed. I nodded. "Yeah, I bet." She finally noticed the stripped bed. "Why'd you take the sheets off?" I set my phone down and looked at her. Felt like a change. She hesitated. I saw the flicker of something in her eyes. Uncertainty. Like maybe, finally, she was starting to sense that something was off. But she didn't ask. She didn't want to know. And that was her biggest mistake. Because the next time she asked a question, it would be too late. She had spent months playing this game. Now it was my turn. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything settle over me. Emily, of course, had no idea. She had fallen asleep within minutes, curled up on the very mattress where she had let another man touch her. That thought made my skin crawl. I got up before sunrise. I wasn't in the mood to pretend anymore. The sight of her lying there, peaceful, undisturbed, while I sat with the truth burning a hole through my chest, made me feel sick. By the time she woke up, I was already in the kitchen, drinking my coffee, scrolling through my phone. Not out of habit, out of necessity. Because if I wasn't focused on something, I was afraid I'd explode. She walked in, rubbing her eyes, her hair a mess. "Morning," she mumbled. I didn't answer. She blinked at me, confused, then walked to the coffee machine. "You okay?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt nothing but resentment. I set my cup down. "Where were you last weekend?" Emily froze for just a second. It was subtle. Anyone else wouldn't have noticed, but I did. Then she turned around, her face neutral. "What?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "I asked where you were last weekend." She scoffed, shaking her head. "What kind of question is that?" "You know where I was. I had that work thing." I nodded slowly, watching her. "Right? The work thing." She walked over to the counter, grabbing her phone like it was a lifeline. "Why are you asking?" I tilted my head. "Just wondering, since I saw the pictures." That did it. Her whole body tensed. She didn't turn around right away, but I could see the way her shoulders locked, the way her fingers tightened around her coffee mug. When she finally faced me, her expression was carefully blank. "What pictures?" I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I had created. Every screenshot, every email, every image was stored there. I turned the screen toward her and let her see it. I watched the blood drain from her face. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She swallowed. "I can explain." I laughed, shaking my head. "Explain what, exactly?" "That you've been screwing Adrian behind my back? That you've been taking him to hotels while lying to my face? That you brought him here?" My voice rose with every word, the anger I had been holding back breaking free. She blinked rapidly, her breathing uneven. "I never meant—" "Oh, don't even start with that," I snapped. "You meant every single thing you did. You meant to cheat. You meant to lie. You meant to disrespect me. You just never meant to get caught." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't like that." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Then tell me, Emily, what the hell was it like?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I nodded, shoving my phone back in my pocket. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Denial and lies. She wiped at her face, shaking her head. "It wasn't serious. It was a mistake, okay? A stupid, meaningless thing. I was just lost for a while." I let out a sharp laugh. "Lost? You weren't lost, Emily. You knew exactly what you were doing. You built a whole damn relationship with this guy." Her hands clenched into fists. "That's not true." I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to one of the private photos, the one of her hand on his leg. I held it up. "You're telling me this doesn't look like a relationship?" She sucked in a breath, her face twisting with guilt. "It wasn't, I swear, it wasn't serious." I shook my head, disgusted. "Stop lying." Her eyes flashed. "I'm not lying." I stepped closer, my voice dropping lower. "You know the worst part?" She swallowed hard, her lip trembling. "It's not even the affair itself." I continued, my tone sharp. "It's the way you threw it in my face. The way you smiled at me every day, knowing damn while you were sneaking around with another man. The way you let me sit here, clueless, while the whole world got to see how much of a fool I was." Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to get caught." She let out a shaky breath, wiping her face. And the worst part? I cut her off. "You were never going to tell me. If I hadn't found out, you'd still be doing this, wouldn't you?" She said nothing. That silence was my final confirmation. I exhaled slowly, the weight of it all settling over me. This was it, the moment where everything truly ended. The insanity of it all. And then, as if she hadn't already buried herself deep enough, Emily did something that made my blood boil all over again. She got angry. "You know what?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "Maybe if you had paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to go looking somewhere else." I froze. She had the audacity to blame me. I stared at her, my anger shifting into something colder, something sharper. "Are you actually serious right now?" She threw her hands up. "I'm just saying. I wasn't happy. You were always busy, always distracted. I needed someone who made me feel wanted." I let out a low laugh. "Oh, so this is my fault now?" She bit her lip, her face flushed. I'm just saying it wasn't black and white. I shook my head. You know what? Forget it. I don't even care anymore. She took a shaky breath. Can we fix this? I stared at her, genuinely stunned at the question. Fix this? She nodded quickly, stepping toward me. We can go to therapy. We can work through it. I know I messed up, but we can... No. Her face crumbled. What? I exhaled. Emily, there's no coming back from this. You didn't just cheat. You built a whole life behind my back. And the second I confronted you, you tried to turn it around on me. She let out a soft sob. I love you, okay? I laughed bitterly. No, you don't. You love the comfort. You love the image of our marriage. But love? No. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. She shook her head, tears falling freely now. Please. I turned and walked away, because there was nothing left to say. I didn't sleep that night. I barely even moved. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing, letting the weight of everything sink in. The house was quiet, too quiet. Emily had retreated to the bedroom after our fight, probably thinking I'd cool off, that I'd wake up in the morning ready to talk things through. She was wrong. By the time the sun came up, my mind was made. This wasn't something we could work through. This wasn't some mistake to be forgiven. Emily hadn't tripped and fallen into another man's bed. She had built a relationship behind my back, lied to my face, and then, when caught, tried to twist it into something I had done wrong. I wasn't going to let her rewrite reality. I wasn't going to let her turn me into the fool again. The last morning, when she finally emerged from the bedroom, she looked awful. Puffy eyes, dark circles, the kind of exhaustion that came from a restless night. Good. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee calm. She hesitated in the doorway. Morning, she said, her voice hoarse. I didn't answer. She stepped forward cautiously. I know you're mad. I cut her off. I'm not mad. She blinked. You're not? I shook my head. No, Emily. I was mad last night. Now I'm just done. Her breath hitched. What does that mean? I set my mug down and looked her dead in the eyes. It means I want a divorce. She paled. The silence stretched between us. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there like the ground had been ripped out from under her. Finally, she let out a choked breath. You don't mean that? I leaned back, crossing my arms. Yeah, I do. Her hands clenched at her sides. We can fix this. We build a life together. I scoffed. No, I build a life. You build a lie. Her face twisted with guilt, frustration, desperation. I messed up, okay? I know that. But we can get past this. I can fix it. I tilted my head. How, Emily? How exactly do you plan to fix the fact that you were screwing another man for months? How do you fix the fact that you brought him into our home? That you sat at this table, slept in our bed, and pretended like everything was fine? She had no answer. Because there wasn't one. The begging. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't want to lose you. I sighed. You lost me the second you chose him over me. Her lip trembled. I never chose him. I was lost, okay? I made a mistake, but I never stopped loving you. I laughed, shaking my head. You don't get to say that. You don't cheat on someone you love, Emily. You don't build a whole secret life behind their back. You don't stand there and try to make excuses when you're caught. She swallowed hard. But we're married. That has to mean something. Not anymore. She started to panic now, stepping closer, reaching out like she could physically pull me back into her fantasy. We've been through so much together. You can't just throw it all away. I pulled back. I didn't throw anything away. You did. She wiped at her face, her breath shaky. It didn't mean anything. Adrian, he was never important. You are. I narrowed my eyes. Then why did you keep going back to him? She had no answer. Instead, she crumbled. She sank into the chair across from me, burying her face in her hands, sobbing. I'm sorry, she choked out. Please, please don't do this. But I had already made up my mind. The final blow. I stood up. I already have an appointment with a lawyer. Her head snapped up. You what? I shrugged. I made the call this morning. She let out a broken sob. You didn't even talk to me first? I laughed coldly. Talk to you? Emily, you had months to talk to me. Instead, you spent them sneaking around with another man. Her breathing was ragged now, her whole body trembling. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered again, barely audible. I looked down at her. For a brief second, I thought about the woman I had married, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had built a future with. But that woman didn't exist anymore. I grabbed my keys. "You already did?" And then I walked out the door. I didn't look back when I walked out the door. I didn't pause to hear her cry, didn't stop to watch her fall apart. She had already done enough damage. I got in my car and drove. Nowhere specific. Just away. Away from the house that had become nothing but a reminder of her betrayal. Away from the woman who had smiled at me every morning while lying through her teeth. Away from the wreckage of a life I thought was real. I should have felt something: grief, anger, regret. But all I felt was relief. It was over. Breaking the news. The first person I told was my lawyer. "I want this done fast," I said as I sat across from him in his office. He nodded, flipping open a folder. "Do you have proof of the affair?" I pulled out my phone and slid it across the desk. "Enough to make sure she doesn't walk away with anything." He scrolled through the photos, the screenshots, the emails. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. "This is airtight." I leaned back in my chair. Good. I wasn't going to let her take half of what I had built. Not after what she had done. She had already stolen time, trust, and love. I wasn't going to let her take more. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her play the victim. Emily's breakdown. She called me later that night. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "Please, can we talk? I know you're mad, but we can fix this. I don't want to lose you." I didn't answer. Then, hours later, "Emily, fine. If you want a divorce, at least talk to me first." I sighed, gripping my phone. I didn't know her anything, but a part of me wanted to see her face when she realized there was no going back. The last conversation. The next day, I met her at the house. She looked awful, her eyes swollen, her hair a mess, like she had been crying all night. I didn't care. She stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. "Thank you for coming." I said nothing, stepping inside. The house felt different now. Cold. Empty. She shut the door behind me. She took a shaky breath. "I don't know how we got here." I laughed bitterly. "You don't?" Tears filled her eyes. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we were happy before, weren't we?" I shook my head. "No, Emily. I was happy. You were sleeping with another man." She flinched, fresh tears spilling down her face. "I was stupid. You were selfish." She wiped at her face. I thought maybe you want to try." I scoffed. "Try? What exactly am I supposed to try? Pretending this never happened? Sleeping next to you, knowing where you've been, holding your hand, knowing you gave yourself to someone else?" She sobbed. "I was lost." "No," I said, my voice firm. "You were a liar." Silence. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I took a deep breath. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to tell you it's over." Her whole body crumbled. "Please," she whispered. "I love you." I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said the words I should have said long ago. "No, you don't." She broke, sank to the floor, sobbing, clutching at her chest like she could physically hold on to something that was already gone. I didn't stay to comfort her. I turned and walked away. Because this was the end, and I was finally free.